And we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. If you do have any questions, you can send them in using the chat part of the Zoom interface, and I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. So we'll start with just a little background on who Zycel is. So Zycel has been making computer networking products since 1989. Our headquarters is in Hsinchu, Taiwan, and our US operations are based out of Anaheim, California. So our Anaheim location is our warehouse. It is our marketing team. It is our tech support team. It is basically everything. So when you call in for support during business hours, you are talking to a Zycel employee based out of our Anaheim location. So we've been doing this for a little over 30 years. We have 100 million devices deployed out in the field. Now, I am part of the Zycel team known as Zycel Networks. So Zycel is part of the Zycel group. And give me just a second here. Um, So Zycel Group is made up of a lot of little smaller subsidiary companies. So Zycel Networks is where I work from, and that is where we make our products that are aimed at um, the channel space. So switches, access points, gateways. We used to do a lot of home products, not so much, especially here in North America now. There is Zycel Communications, our sister company, which is primarily focused on the ISP space. And in North America, they're pretty much entirely focused on the CPE side of things. There is going to be overlap between those two groups. So that's why sometimes, like for instance, we will be soon offering GPON COE equipment through Zycel Networks here in North America. And the only name else on here I wanted to point out was MitraStar. So MitraStar is our manufacturing arm. They have factories in Taiwan and China. So now we'll start talking about Nebula. So what is Nebula? So Nebula was the first full stack cloud networking solution for SMB. So what does that mean? Um, so we'll start here with full stack. So full stack means basically it's more than just one or two products. So in the case of Zycel Nebula, it's designed to work with our switches, our access points, our security routers, our Soho SMB security devices, and our outdoor 4G LTE router. So it's basically allowing you to manage the core aspects of your network through a single pane of glass. And then the cloud side of things means the management interface is hosted in the cloud. So back in the early 2010s, when this was sort of a new space, we saw what some of the other vendors were doing, specifically Cisco's Meraki. When it came to cloud management, and thought, hey, that is a great idea. There are a lot of benefits there for our smaller SMB customers, for smaller MSPs. And at the time, no one was really making a product aimed for that space. Meraki was very firmly aimed at enterprise, as were some of the other solutions that were out there from other vendors. So we decided to make a version of that, but for that's more affordable and whose feature set is tailored to the SMB business space rather than the enterprise business space. So we launched Nebula all the way back in 2016. So we have been doing this for a really long time. And what that means is, we've had a lot of time to refine the product, to improve the product, and we continue to do so going forward. We're always looking to make Nebula a better experience for you. So you may be asking yourself, why would I want to use cloud management for my networks? And sort of the idea here is we'll start by just talking about a typical new customer deployment. All the things you have to go through. I won't stop and talk about each one of these here, but these are all the stuff you have to do and set up to get a new customer up and online for you. So the idea with Nebula is to take all of that and pare it back. Reduce the amount of stuff that you need to buy by combining things together. Reduce how much time it takes to set up and configure things, how much time it takes to set up remote access, monitoring, etc. So we're saving you time, we're saving you money, and making just your life easier. That's why you would want to move to the cloud. So we'll start going through some of the features here of Nebula for you. So you can see there, this is our dashboard. This is what you're going to see when you log into Nebula. We've got the dark version of it up on the screen there. So one of the cool things you can do with Nebula is you can start configuring your customers' networks without having to take anything out of the box. In fact, you don't even have to have settled on your final products to be able to at least do some of your configuration. At any point, you can go to nebula.zicel.com, create a new customer of yours, start creating new sites for them, and start doing some basic configuration. Once the hardware has been shipped to you, you just use our mobile app. You scan the QR code that can be found on the outside of most boxes, assign that product to your customer and to their site, and you can do the full configuration from that point on. No need to take anything out of the box. And then once you've shipped it out to your customer's location, as soon as you plug it in so it has power and an internet connection, it will reach out to the cloud automatically. See you want to manage it in the cloud, put itself in the cloud mode, update the firmware, download the configuration. So the guys out in the field don't have to do anything other than plug it in. So Nebula itself includes a number of tools, wizards, and features that make it easy for you to get at least a basic network up and running in just a few minutes, whether we're walking you through a wizard for some basic settings or allowing you to clone existing customers or sites you have set up in the past. So to use Nebula, the only thing you need to do is buy Nebula compatible hardware. So there's nothing else you need to buy, set up, or configure. So there's no cloud keys, there's no CNA devices, there's no software that needs to be installed on a computer or a virtual machine or a server someplace. The agent and everything that you need to use Nebula is available through your web browser, through our cloud platform, and built into the hardware itself. So once you've plugged in and hooked up your Nebula network, you have access to it. You don't need to worry about setting up port forwards or VPN connections to remotely manage your customers. You simply log into Nebula. They're all there in one location for you. In addition to managing the network, we also have some tools built into Nebula to help you manage the users on the customer premise there. So whether you're wanting to do advanced WPA enterprise security, whether you want to do usernames and passwords for users to get access to, say, a guest network, um, things like that, we have a built-in cloud-hosted user database that you can use if you choose to. Of course, you can always still set up your own Radius or Active Directory server to use those features as well. Just something else we offer to make things easier and go a little bit quicker for you. So Nebula, our access points themselves have their own captive portal functionality built into them. So even if you aren't using a Nebula gateway, you can still offer captive portal guest networks for your guests. And on their captive portal, it's very flexible. We offer you the ability, to determine whether people just need to agree with terms of service to get online, or if they need to log in with a username and password, or you want them to register their own accounts, you can do that with the built-in functionality on Nebula. In addition to the standard VLANing to isolate your users, if you have a non-VLAN aware network, you can use our layer 2 isolation feature to isolate those wireless users and prevent them from being able to access any other LAN resources that your company uses. So keeping them separate there for you. We also have the ability to put them on their own subnet. Our access points can do NAT, and they can do NAT on a per SSID basis, making sure those users are on their own subnet, further isolating them from the corporate network. So all configuration changes, all firmware updates are done through the cloud. There is no point you need to go on site or get direct site access to be able to do that. The only time, if you're using Nebula, you would need to access the device itself is if you're using fixed IP addresses during the initial setup of the product. Our suggestion would be that you at least temporarily enable DHCP for the initial setup and then use Nebula to convert them over to fixed IP. But if for some reason you can't do that and the devices need an assigned fixed IP address, the first time they're turned on, you will need to go into the device and can configure that manually through the interface. But otherwise, everything else is done through the cloud. So we'll talk about some of the fun features we have here. So on the wireless side of things, we have single click wireless mesh. You simply enable this and it'll allow you to create a mesh network automatically. So if you need to expand coverage to some place you can't run Ethernet cables to, or you don't have time to run Ethernet cables to, you can simply enable mesh and deploy additional access points in other locations. So as mentioned earlier, WPA Enterprise is built in as part of our wireless feature set. We also have the ability to support fast roaming, so 802.11r, K, and V, which are various technologies there to help with roaming and help with voice. So if you're doing voice over Wi-Fi, make things go a little bit smoother for you. On the switch side of things, we make it really easy for you to tell what's going on your switch ports, which ports have something plugged into them, what speed those connections are, whether or not PoE power is currently being provided through those ports. We give you tools to see what the data traffic has looked like over time, and a number of troubleshooting live tools here, such as pings from the switch, to let you see what's going on. And on the security side of things, on the switches, we have the ability to use 802.1x authentication to authenticate users on those switch ports before we allow traffic through. We have ACL rules set up. We have the ability to automatically block rogue DHCP servers and a number of other features that you would expect to find on a business class switch. So up to this point, everything I have talked about is free. So Nebula itself is free. This is probably the biggest thing that sets us apart from our competition. Our free version of Nebula gives you access to all the core features of your hardware, and there are no limitations to the number of devices or the number of customers or the number of sites that you can manage with the free version of Nebula. So David had a question about something I was talking about on a few slides. So I'm going to go ahead and try to answer that just now before we get too far on from that. So he's asking about the guest isolation feature for Wi-Fi. Let me take a look here at the full question itself. So to use our Wi-Fi captive portal and guest isolation features does not require our security gateway. So the captive portal functionality is built in on the access point itself. The ability to do NAT on a per SSID basis, that is built into the access point itself. So if you're using another vendor's gateway, or they've got, some scaled down gateway that came from their ISP that they can't swap out for whatever reason, you can still isolate those users regardless of what router they're using our layer 2 isolation feature. Of course, we support VLANing on a per SSID basis also. But yeah, you don't need one of our firewalls to be able to use that guest isolation feature. It is built in on it. As to learning more about it, you can log in at Nebula at any time and use our demo site and play around with that layer 2 isolation feature. Or you can talk to your sales guy. They can put you in touch with our sales engineer if you have any additional questions that you need to answer. So I think I've answered that. I'm going to go ahead and move on the presentation here. So as I just mentioned, Nebula itself is free, and this is our biggest differentiator from our competition. There are some other guys that offer free versions of their cloud. Usually their clouds are not as robust as far as the feature set goes. And I believe all of them, except for us, have some sort of cap on the number of devices, users, or sites that you can manage through a single account. So let's talk about what's called Nebula Flex, because this is a term you will see. So when we first started out doing Nebula, we copied Cisco Meraki's method, where there was one product line for traditional management and a separate product line for cloud management. So we realized that doesn't work in the SMB space. You may have customers that need both, and you don't want to have two sets of hardware to manage. So what we've done is we've basically baked Nebula into pretty much everything we sell nowadays, anything that's manageable, at least, that's aimed at the SMB space, not our Soho stuff for the most part. And so that Nebula client is built into our hardware now on basically everything. So you can standardize on one set of hardware and then determine at the time of deployment or after deployment if you want to use it traditionally or you want to manage it through the Nebula cloud. So that's what we call Nebula Flex. We're giving you the flexibility to use either mode. And it's really simple to switch modes. You do not have to do anything on the device itself. Again, everything is done through our cloud portal. So to convert a device into a Nebula device, you simply log into Nebula and add that device to your Nebula cloud and assign it to a customer and site. Within a few minutes, the device will detect that and automatically reboot itself into cloud mode and download the configuration from the cloud. If at any point you want to go back and use it, say you're moving it to another customer site or you're moving it back to your lab and you just need it in standalone mode for some troubleshooting or whatever, you simply go into Nebula, remove it from your Nebula inventory. It will detect that. It will automatically reboot in standalone mode and put itself on the factory default configuration. So if you are switching modes, you will need to reconfigure it when you go from cloud back to standalone. We also have something you will see called Nebula Flex Pro. And so what that has to do with is the fact that we do offer some optional paid licenses for you that unlock some additional features. So the most popular of those is called Pro Pack. So if you see a device that says it's Nebula Flex Pro, all that's telling you is that this is a Nebula Flex device that comes bundled with 1 year of our Pro Pack license. That's all that means. So for Nebula, the free version is called Base Pack, and that's what most people out there are using. We have Plus Pack, which is designed to sort of compete with some of those low-end paid offerings. And then we have our Pro Pack, which is primarily unlocking features aimed at the MSP users out there, or those of you that are managing a lot of customers. And then we also have another type of license called the MSP pack. And as the name implies, it is aimed at those of you that are MSPs. It's primarily aimed at managing a large number of customers and a large number of admin accounts. Those are most of the features are aimed at that space. Both of these features, we have a 30-day free trial that you can access. So the Plus and Pro Pack licenses are on a per organization basis. The MSP license is a per user license. So think of this as a customer-based license. So if you want to upgrade someone from the free to Plus or Pro, you do that on a per customer basis, and we call those orgs in the Nebula interface. And then for the MSP licensing, that is a per user license. So each user that you want to have access to these features, you would buy the license for that user. So that's just what it's showing here. So generally, you're going to set up each customer of yours as their own organization, and then you control whether they're using the free Plus or Pro version on an org basis. In order to convert an organization from the free version of Nebula to one of those extra Pro or Plus pack license packs, every device in the organization does need to have a valid license. So if there's a device that is missing a license, it will not allow you to convert that organization from the free version to the optional paid license until every device has its own license. So just to show here really quick, when it comes to Nebula Flex, our standard Nebula Flex products are our N series access points, our 19, 15, 20, and 30 series business switches, and our security appliances that do not come bundled with UTM services. For Nebula Flex Pro, which again is just coming bundled with a 1 year Pro Pack license, it is our W series access points, our 13, 22, and 38 series switches, and any of our security appliances, when you buy them, if they come bundled with UTM services, they also will come bundled with the 1 year Nebula Flex Pro. So we've got a detailed chart here showing you some of the feature differences between free Nebula, Plus, and Pro Pack. This is available online if you search for it, or you can always reach out to your salesperson and they can send you actually a much more longer and detailed version of this. I'm just going to hit on some of the key differences here. So free version of Nebula gives you access to our Nebula web interface, access to our app, our zero-touch configuration, firmware scheduling, multiple admin users, unlimited number of devices, sites, and customers for management, MAC filtering, 802.1x authentication, captive portal, etc. If you upgrade to one of the free, paid licenses, some of the differences that you will see have to do with the logs. So we only store 24 hours worth of logs in the cloud when the free version of Nebula. Plus Pack will store a week's worth of logs, and Pro Pack stores a year's worth of logs. Another area where these differences is the number of admin accounts you can have on a per organization basis. So each organization has a cap on the number of admins for that organization. So for free version of Nebula, you're limited to 5 per org. Plus Pack 8 per org, and Pro Pack there's no limit. And then, as I mentioned before, we do also offer you access to a cloud-hosted user database. So the free version of Nebula limits that to 50 users in that cloud hosted database. You can always still set up your own Radius server if you need more than that and don't want to use our cloud database. Plus Pack gives you 100 entries, and then Pro Pack, there's no limit on that. So what are some of the other things you get with ProPack? So one of the things you get is push alerts, letting you know if a device goes offline. You can set, criteria for how long that device is offline, and once it hits that, it will let you know that something's gone offline. Some of the other features we have here is the ability to use Wi-Fi vouchers, basically paid guest access for public hotspots. User audit log where we track configuration changes and who made those changes to help you research, if you're troubleshooting something that's gone down, to maybe figure out who made that change and why. The ability to back up and restore your switch configurations. Our artificial intelligence for Wi-Fi health monitoring, where we can monitor the wireless users and make configuration changes, and a number of other features there. A couple of the other ones that were on that chart that I didn't hit on here is ProPack gives you access to this automatic topology view. It's going to automatically generate a map of all of the network devices that are on your network, including the users, and show you which devices are connected to which other devices. So again, it's a nice little troubleshooting tool there. You can click on the user or the device on this topology view, and it'll give you some background information on what that device is, how many users are connected to it, the IP address, some other basic information like that. It may also give you access to some basic configuration changes that you can make through this. Another cool feature that ProPack unlocks for you is the ability to do DPPSK, or dynamic pre-shared key. So basically, instead of using 802.1x to provide each user their own unique username and password, and instead of having to segregate your users onto different SSIDs based on which resources you want them to have access to, with DPPSK, you have one SSID that all users use, and each user is provided their own unique PSK. So it simplifies the configuration of multi-user Wi-Fi access, because you don't have to go in and configure 802.1x on each user's device. You simply give them their own pre-shared key, and they access the SSID just like you would at home. You connect to the SSID, put in your pre-shared key, and you're connected. Where the magic is on the back end, is we can tell which pre-shared key was used to authenticate that device, and then we can move them to to specific VLANs based on that. So basically, it references a database. It says, "Oh, this is so and so because this is the password they use. These are the resources they have access to, and we control that with VLANing." So as mentioned before, we do have some cool AI and machine learning features that are able to monitor your wireless network, um, and make some minor changes to the network to try to help solve any performance issues that we automatically notice there. Some other features that ProPack unlocks is on the switches. It unlocks those IPTV camera features on the 1350 series of switches. It also unlocks the ability to automatically assign users VLANs based on the device MAC address, or more specifically, the first 6 digits of the MAC address. So for instance, if all of your IP phones are from one vendor, you can put that MAC address in there, and it will automatically, when it sees one of those devices plugged in, automatically assign them to your voice VLAN. And you can also use this functionality for other types of devices and other different VLANs that you may have set up on your network. And then we'll talk briefly here about the security side of things, which admittedly isn't an area where I have a lot of knowledge here. But some of the other features here that are optional for you um, is if you are using our access points and you are using our security gateways, we do offer collaborative detection and response, which allows the access points to sort of work together with your security gateway to enhance security for your wireless users. We also offer an optional license for our access points, which provides sort of what I would call a UTM Lite functionality on the access points themselves. So this is a license for your access point. So, maybe they've got a non-UTM aware switch and you'd like to provide some additional security for those wireless users. You can do that with our CNP and CNP Plus licenses. So when you're using Nebula, it makes it easy for you to synchronize your settings and do multi-site security configurations when using the Nebula interface here. And we also offer a number of tools through Nebula to make it easy for remote workers to be able to VPN back in the office, whether it's secure Wi-Fi, which turns an access point into a cloud managed VPN appliance, or whether it's scripts that automatically configure a user's iOS or Windows device to be able to VPN back into the office. And then Nebula does work with our Secure Reporter, so it makes it really easy to share information from Nebula into Secure Reporter and quickly jump from the Nebula interface into Secure Reporter for those detailed breakdowns of your security performance. So we're almost done here, guys. I want to talk a little bit about the Nebula architecture because this is an area where we get a lot of questions. Can we use Nebula if the customer is doing PCI or if it's a HIPAA installation, or for those of you that are operating in Europe, GDPR rules? So the answer to that for all of that is yes. Nebula is just fine with HIPAA, PCI, and basically just about any other privacy or security requirements that different countries may have. That is because we are a global company. So we do have to design our back end here to comply with the local laws and rules. And the reason we can do that is because with Nebula, none of your customers' traffic is touching our infrastructure. LAN traffic stays on the LAN. WAN traffic goes directly out to the internet. It does not get pumped through our cloud first. Um, so the only thing that's going to our cloud service itself is basically just the management traffic and log information. Nothing else is being stored in our clouds. So you are good to go there. So one question we get is, well, how secure is the communication to the cloud? So a lot of other companies out there have come up with their own in-house solutions, and you just kind of have to, trust them that they've done the work properly. In our case, we've used an industry standard called NetConf. So that's what Nebula uses to control and encrypt the communication between our hardware and our cloud. So it's not something that's home built. It is a industry standard that we use. And then when it comes to Nebula itself, the cloud portion of things, it is Amazon hosted by Amazon AWS, probably the most reliable and most counted upon cloud infrastructure out there. So because of that, we give you a 4 nines SLA as far as uptime of the cloud itself. But we always get questions, what happens if, Amazon, every few years they do have an outage. What happens if there's an Amazon outage? What happens if the fiber gets cut to my customer's location and it's down for a few days? And the answer to that is nothing. Nothing happens. All of your Nebula compatible hardware continues to function just as it was. There is no point where it says, hey, I can't authenticate with the cloud. I'm shutting down. Something some other cloud hardware has done in the past. Now, our stuff just keeps running. Obviously, you can't make any cloud configuration changes. You can't, the logs aren't being stored in the cloud. So they will be buffered as long as they can on the device itself. But if it's a long outage, eventually that buffer is going to fill up. But then once the Nebula cloud comes back online or the internet connection comes back up, it'll download any configuration changes you made at that point. It will upload any logs it still has buffered to the cloud. So there is no interruption really as far as the user experience is concerned. So finally, why should I use Nebula? Just to summarize it here, it's easy to start. It's easy to set up. It scales and basically unlimited for you. No matter how many customers you have, it will scale at no additional cost for you. It just makes it easy for you to keep an eye on your customers' networks, to push out configuration changes, to know that something's gone wrong often before your customer knows. And it's cheap, right? It's free to use. If you do want those extra features that are in the Pro Pack, it's $30 roughly per device per year. So it's insanely cheap compared to some of the other SMB oriented cloud solutions that are out there. So you say to yourself, this sounds interesting. How do I test it out? So at anyone at any point can go to nebula.zycel.com. When you get to the login screen at the very bottom, there is a button that says try it out or live demo. I forget what the exact text is today. You click that and it will take you into a live working demo. So you can play around with it. If you are one of our partners and have part of our partner program, so that means you're a VAR system integrator MSP, our sales guys can hook you up with a Nebula demo kit. And we've got a special demo kits that we've set up, and we've got promos running right now. If you are buying through Target distribution, you can order that demo kit directly through them. Um, or otherwise, just reach out to your Zycel salesperson, Andy, Jacob, or Dave, and they can hook you up with one of those demo kits. And that ends today's webinar. If there are any questions, do send them in. Other than that question earlier, I haven't gotten any others pending, but I'll stick around here a few minutes while we wait for that. While we do, I do want to point out here that we do have our own North America Zycel YouTube channel, Zycel America channel. Most of our webinars are recorded and reposted to that. We also have video case studies, best practices videos, product introduction videos, all posted there. And if you're one of those LinkedIn people, which I am not, you can reach out and connect with us at Zycel US channel on LinkedIn. And then my email is now up there on the screen for you, Sean R, SHAWNR at Zycel.com. So if you have any questions, feedbacks, or suggestions for future webinar topics, you can send them to me, or of course, you can always just reach out to your sales contact, and they'll make sure that I get it. So I don't have any questions that have come in, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you at one of our future webinars.